Welcome everyone to yet another edition of OPN's Dev Talks. I am unfortunately once again your host, Steven. I also troll on Steam as Slave2Machine. I am joined today with Steven Orlando from Robit Studios, and we're going to be talking about Treasure Adventure World. And before we get into that, I have a new face on the call with us today, one of our newest members for OPN, Raylak. You
Hi.
can see him. You can see this crazy guy that we have in the basement every Tuesday on our weekly Should We Cover It show, where we go over trailers on Steam and other platforms. We always have that on Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern. But for right now, let's get right into it. Steven, thank you for
Hi, how's it
joining
going?
us today. Hey,
Oh,
how you
thank
doing?
you.
So,
Good.
so tell me a little bit. Let's get right into it. Tell me a little bit about how Robit Studios came about.
Sure. So really it just, well, okay, actually I get to go way back before even it was a game company. The name itself comes from my first company that I started with a friend of mine where we were actually printing t-shirts,
Hmm.
kind of doing their shirts. And actually this is a total coincidence, but I'm wearing one of them right now. So this is an example of one of the shirts we had here. Let me stand up.
Oh, oh, I
So
like that.
yeah, so I had a friend who was an artist, and I was going through business school and doing my MBA, and
Hmm.
we were like, we should collaborate and try to do something that'd be fun and way to like use our talents. And so we did this for a while, a couple of years, and it did make a little money and it did pretty well. We got a lot of good pension and stuff, but ultimately it wasn't enough to keep it going, and we sort of ended up doing different things. But in the middle of that, I started to sort of get into it was right around 2007 2008 when games like Cave Story were coming out and Knit Stories and other small like independent games that were making a splash, and it sort of got me reinterested in games because I had kind of gotten like the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. I sort of lost interest in a little bit. There weren't a lot of games that were interesting to me at the time, and so I sort of like lost touch with gaming a little bit. But when I started seeing these like interesting indie games come on PCs, it started to remind me of some of the stuff I did when I was a kid, goofing around with game makers and programming and stuff. And so one day I literally just pulled open an old program I used to use, which was it used to be called Click and Play, then it became Click and Create, and then it became Multimedia Fusion. And I downloaded this app, and it was still available, and it was really familiar to me. And so I started tooling around and seeing what I could do, and before you know it, like I was making a game. I didn't even really plan on it; it just sort of happened.
Hmm.
Um, the first game I made ultimately kind of failed because I was way over my head of what I was trying to do. I was trying to do some like high concept stuff, I guess, and I had no idea what I was really doing.
Okay.
The game ended up being called Karma, and it was supposed to be a game where it was a platforming game, but the idea was you were supposed to not like kill everything in sight, but rather find non-violent ways to solve the problems that are happening in this world.
Okay.
So like things like you come to a boss fight and there's one way you could just kill the boss, or you could find a way to just like stop the boss, or do something else. And thing is, it was really difficult to like continue to come up with scenarios like that made sense. And when I tested the game with people, they wanted to kill everything. Like, why can't I kill that bad guy that's like bothering me? Like, I want to just like destroy him. I'm like, okay, it's that is possible to do. Like, I think Undertale,
Yeah,
did that really
I,
well.
I
But
was I was just about to say. And when was
right,
this that you came up with this idea?
well, it was a long time ago, and I picked the wrong genre. I think RPG was the genre to do it in. You know what I mean? Platforming game, especially one where I was trying to avoid using dialogue, and I was trying to do all these other kind of things, and
Yeah.
it was very, very just way above what I was my abilities. So I literally stepped back and like wrote down like a list of things that I enjoyed in games, and it became things like collecting treasures, big adventure, open world, giant open world, and that's literally how the name Treasure Adventure World, or originally it was Treasure Adventure Game, came into being. Um, so that was it. Literally was just sort of like a working title at the time. So I kind of retooled my previous game and made it more of like a grand adventure platforming game, or like a Metroidvania, I guess would be another way to describe it.
Yeah.
Um, of course, at the time I also had no idea how long it would take to make a game like that. But I thought, maybe 6 months I'll have something, and a couple years later, I finally did launch my first game, which was Treasure Adventure Game. Um, Along the way, I picked up a guy named Robert Ellis, who became our kind of like lead sound and music guy. He did all the music and the sound effects in that game, and he's still on board for the new project. And we we put it out as freeware. I never really intended to sell it, partially because it was a learning experience for
Mm-hmm.
me, and I guess partially because I just wasn't confident that it would, get a following if I put it out for a price. I really didn't know what I was doing. So I thought, if I kind of take the Cave Story model where they put out a free game and then later we're able to, kind of like repurpose it commercially. And I thought, maybe that would work for me too. And it ultimately did, because when we put out Treasure Venture game, it sort of got picked up. It won some awards. It got some interest from a publisher, and who's Chucklefish, who's publishing us now. And so we basically did what kind of the Cave Story model, which is, let's take the game that we made for free and let's retool it, let's revamp it, let's make a better version of it that we can make commercially successful. I've learned a lot since then. That was like, I had a lot of new ideas I wanted to implement, things I couldn't do in that game that now I would be able to. So yeah, that's kind of where we sort of how we got to where we are now. So
it's a heck of a pedigree for certain. So let's just kind of take that apart bit by bit. So you go from selling T-shirts to selling games, or not officially selling games. In all the developer talks that we've had here, and we've had a lot, I think that is probably the strangest journey I have heard in the last week. So to go from selling T-shirts with Frankenstein's monster on it, to go to tinkering around with games, and that's kind of one of the things that always interested me, is that even back 10 years ago or so, there were still platforms available that if you didn't know much about coding, you could still build a game. I mean, we can kind of knock RPG Maker style games, but they are pretty much kind of the gateway drug, right? So when you were tinkering with these formats, what was that aha moment? What was that moment when you thought, I really want to do this? Because coding and developing is not sexy, right? It's not something that somebody wants to get into. They just kind of either fall into it with a natural aptitude, or they pour over manual over manual over manual, and then they put something out. What was the point where you thought, I really want to keep doing this?
Okay, so a couple of things come to mind. Around the same time that I was doing the T-shirt company, I was the reason why I did that was because, as I mentioned, I was going through my MBA program, and while I was like, really happy to be doing that, because I thought this will give me a future somewhere, no matter what I do. I think an MBA can be, a very flexible degree, but it was really not giving me the creative itch it wasn't scratching the creative itch that I had. And so I didn't really know what that was. And I thought maybe that doing, this collaboration with T-shirts would be that. It wasn't. I tried other things. I tried other artistic formats, other things that I was like, maybe this will be it. This will be it. Like even things like glass blowing, or I actually did like a hip hop dance class like for a year, and actually did like a recital and everything. Like I just did things that I was like,
wait a minute. Whoa. You can't just gloss that.
All right. The point was, I was trying to discover myself and what the creative outlet I was going to have.
Okay.
That would give me this feeling, like when I got home from my business class, and I could be like, okay, well, I'm doing something that makes me feel good, It wasn't business class, it wasn't business school. So, so when I literally, like that, I told you, one night I pulled the app up and started working. It wasn't until months later that I had the aha moment. And what it was is like, I realized that all the other stuff I lost interest in it. I didn't care about doing the T-shirts anymore. I didn't care about, I did, but like I was quickly losing interest in those things. I wasn't no longer searching for something. I just realized, this is the thing. Like, I'm loving this every night. That I get to do it. During the day when I wasn't able to work on it, I was thinking about it, and it just happened naturally. So it was just like one day I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. So yeah, it really just happened like that. It wasn't planned. It was just, I discovered this. I discovered I basically scratched the itch, and it felt good, So.
I can totally understand that, and that is kind of common with artistic endeavors. You're searching, and then maybe someday you stumble over it. It could be spinning plates, or it could be picking up an instrument, or it could be singing or acting or anything like that. But instead of it being something on a stage, you've got a more I would think a way to reach more people in the shortest amount of time. And that is pretty much where video games kind of come into play, because everybody argues against are video games art thing. I think there was a period of a year or two that you couldn't go to a single video game site, a video game centric media site, and not see that argued in the chat or in the forums.
I remember that year.
So what is your opinion as someone that actually creates? You might be biased, But what is your opinion of video games on the whole as a genre? And so, just for Fred, if he's watching, I said it. Okay, so we have to fit the word genre into every single episode because he's French, and we have to throw it out to him. But what is your overall opinion on that debate?
So whether it's art, I mean, I don't think I'm actually like, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, to be honest. I think that it is. Okay. I do think it is. I don't know if I have a great justification for it. I think like all art, there's high art, there's low, there's low art, there's commercial art. I think games. I mean, I just came back from Indiecade East a couple weeks ago, which is where I ended up meeting you guys originally.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that we sent Chris Kellogg to meet you.
No, actually, I mean, he's why I'm doing the interview. I had a great conversation with him.
Yeah, so he's a great guy.
Yeah, well, I know he's listening, right? So
I am.
So no, I think like one thing I really thought about there was like, this stuff is, a lot of this stuff here is what you just would consider straight art because it's not going to be commercially viable. A lot of those things, especially upstairs where there was a lot of like alternative control schemes, like big like wheels people were turning and all different things like that. That to me is true art because like it's first of all, it's being displayed in a museum. So there you go. And these aren't people who are looking to make $1 million or whatever. So I think like any art form, it kind of runs the gamut. But yeah, I would definitely think it is art. And I always thought it was kind of a silly argument, honestly. I think anytime that you're flexing creative muscles, no matter whether the ultimate goal of it is, I think that's art. So yeah.
Okay. Raylak, I know you got a chance to take a look at the previous game and the trailers and whatnot. And you were telling me that it was an interesting looking thing. What did you mean by that?
Well, at the time I was just watching the trailer for the new one, and I quite like the art style to it. Everything. How do I actually explain what I mean? Use your words. I think it was more once I started comparing it to the first one. I like seeing how it was all inspired off the original game, obviously, but it had also got its own little flair to it, which sort of flowed throughout the entire thing. It all fitted well together.
And Raylak, is this the kind of thing? Because I could get into the Nintendo vibe in a second. I have to argue with you on one point, but I'll do that real soon because Mario 2, I don't know. But Raylak, just as a bit of an outsider, when you look at the original game and you look at this one, are you mentioned about similarities, but not quite the same? What kind of appeals to you? I mean, I know you're a little on the young side compared to anybody else on staff. So, as the not so retro gamer, what do you feel when you watch this?
Well, I don't know. I've played quite a few retro games. I quite like my text adventure games from long before I was born. So
okay.
And I also quite like older graphics games because, especially when you're producing an older graphics game today, it shows that you're not just trying to put fancy explosions on the screen and try and blind me into throwing money at you, which a lot of the AAAs have started to do. If we put pretty cutscenes and explosions on the TV, someone will go and buy the game. For indie games, you don't have several million to spend on publishing and those cutscenes. So you actually have to make a game with content. And quite a few games where they cut back on the graphics so they can spend more time programming and making the game better, you end up with a better game.
Do you feel that's the case there, Stephen?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's I feel like, with a lot of I feel like there's some independent developers probably approach it from that standpoint where it's like we just don't have the budget, so let's do what we can. But honestly, in my eyes, like it was never about being limited by budget. This is, if I had $1 million, I would make a similar looking game, but with a nice coat, nice polish. I'd probably bring in some special effects artists and other things, some better animators and stuff, and do things like that. But obviously money definitely affects graphic fidelity and all that. But that was never like how I approach it. I don't have anything against modern 3D games. I play 3D games. Like I love the Fallout series, for example, and the Skyrim and all that. But For the most part, yeah, I feel like a lot of this stuff loses me. I'm not a big fan of just playing generic dude shooting people. It's just not. It doesn't interest me. I like unique art styles. I like I like games that look like, they are reminiscent of the games I played when I was a kid. It's nostalgic, and I think that's a huge part of it. And obviously, I'm not the only one. A lot of people, there's a huge market for that. Huge number of people
definitely
are interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, though, like I said, I never really gave it much consideration. When I did the first game, it was pixel art because I was doing the art, and that was that was the extent of my skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved on to the new project, our publisher was like, let's look at some artists and see what you want to do. I mean, we thought about just doing a higher res pixel art style, but then I was like, well, originally, if I had the ability, I wouldn't have made it a pixel art game. I would have made it look like a cartoon. That's what I've always wanted to do, is kind of play a game that looks like a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we started bringing artists on board to see what they could do, we tried a couple different styles. I also, the first couple artists just didn't work out. Either our timelines weren't going to work or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then finally, they introduced me to Christine Crosley, who was doing concept art for Starbound, which is, I think it was even pre-beta at that point. It was really early
mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And it just clicked right away. She was really quick, really fast, proficient, and her style, I fell in love with it. I mean, I wish I should have, maybe I can, I said the original thing she sent me was of the character. Like, she sent me her design of the character, and it's almost been unchanged since then. Like, it was like perfect. I was like, you just read my mind, and it's continued to happen. I can just tell her what I'm thinking of, send her a reference image, and she comes back an hour later with something beautiful, and I'm like, okay. So that's the way it's been for years now. And so that was how we fell in ourselves. I feel like I've rambled here and lost the question, but
that's totally that's what this show's about. It's literally giving you the ability to just air everything out. So
okay, well then I always have trouble stopping too, so I'm gonna stop there and let you move on.
So what was the original question?
I don't know.
Okay, Raylak, you asked it. What was the original question? Or did I ask it? I forget.
It sort of started a chain. It was about the graphics and how it evolved from Treasure Adventure game to what is now Treasure Adventure World. Yes. Which I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Why Treasure Adventure World? Has this gone from being just a small little game you created for fun to now being a massive game with lots more content, or is it still the same game but shiny?
So to answer the main part of your question, it's bigger, but not a ton bigger. It really is going to be, we're adding new areas and changing things up, but it's going to be pretty similar overall in size. Why the name change? It was really, first of all, the original name, like I said, it was kind of like work in progress, and I just kind of ended up liking it. I think part of the reason why I named it that was because I've always sort of had this thing where I want people's expectations to be met and exceeded. And if I give it like a name, like some epic name, I don't know, like something that's just like, it screams epicness, then you might be able to play it and be like, well, this doesn't live up to that. So I thought my game was epic, but I wanted the name to sort of downplay. I know that it's completely backwards. You wouldn't do that normally, but I want people to pick up. This looks like a little fun little thing that'll give me an hour of diversion, and then realize, oh no, this is like a 10 to 12 hour adventure. And I don't know if that worked or not, but people seem to like it. And then when it came to making the new game, I gave this thought, a lot of thought. Do I call it Treasure Adventure Game HD? Well, that's kind of dull. And I think I call it Super Treasure Adventure Game, But ultimately, I was really just going back to Super Mario World. It was Super Mario Brothers became Super Mario World. We're like Treasure Adventure Game now will be Treasure Adventure World. It's just it was kind of a throwback to that, I guess. And when people say, well, Treasure Adventure Game is a weird name, like, well, Super Mario Brothers is a weird name, if you think about it, it's a strange name. A lot of games have weird names. People get over it. And when I asked the fans of the Treasure Adventure Game what they thought, they loved it, and they didn't want me to change it too much. They wanted me to stick something similar. But I also do hope that people will think, like you said, hey, Treasure Adventure World, it's going to be more than just a one-to-one remake, because it really is. We are adding levels, and I'm taking every opportunity to tweak puzzles and areas I thought were sloppy in the first game and tighten them up. And make. I mean, listen. I mean, you cannot learn a lot in the. I mean, let's see, 2011 I released it, so it's been 5 years since I released that game, and I've learned so much since then. And it would be a shame to not take advantage of some of what I've learned and fix, fix things up. So it's going to be very familiar. If you play the original one, you play this one, you're going to see a lot of the same areas. The story is basically the same. The characters are the same, but you're going to be constantly running into things that you don't remember because they didn't exist in the first game too. So, and there's probably a lot more of those things that I even think of because I do a lot of it just happens naturally. I don't force anything. It's just when I'm developing, when I'm rebuilding the levels, I say, that seems. I also go back and I've watched a lot of Let's Plays now, which I didn't have the ability to do the first time. So I'm like, I see where people got stuck, where they get frustrated. I watch people play it and I say, okay, well, I'm going to fix that this time. A lot of the bosses in the first game were admittedly sloppy, has way too much randomization. Sometimes people were sitting around just waiting for the boss to get into the right position because it was too random. Stuff I wasn't at the time very cognizant of.
So just like every Nintendo game way back when. I mean, that's all it really was memorization of patterns and watching the boss. But we talk to a lot of devs that they do that, and they do it specifically to try and recapture that Nintendo hard feeling. Because, again, we're in the world of games, not just indie, but AAA as well. We're not that we're knocking on AAA, mind you, but a lot of games are pretty much press A to win nowadays. Whereas back in Nintendo, you had to have that twitch capability. You had to have that movement. Is this game just a really, really big love letter to the Mario series and games of that nature? Especially with the name, that was the first thing that popped into my brain is, okay, adventure game, adventure world, Mario World. Was that on purpose, or was it just something that kind of fell into place?
Well, I guess it was on purpose as much so that like I said, when I kind of made a list of what I thought I liked in games, I was looking at games that I enjoyed, which were games that already existed, obviously. So yeah, I mean, it isn't like I think it's kind of a little bit of both. There were things that I was definitely inspired by and consciously inspired by, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. But I think a lot of things were completely just in my subconscious. And as I go back and I actually replay a lot of games from my youth, recently I picked up the original Donkey Kong game for Game Boy, the one that they made 99 or 94.
Yeah.
And I got to the last, the final boss, and I was like, man, I had played this once, I think, when I was a kid. When I finally got there, and I think I played him one time, and I realized, holy crap, I did a very similar boss in my game to the final boss of Donkey Kong, and I didn't realize that. I didn't even remember it. When I played it again, I was like, I did that. I mean, it wasn't 1-to-1, it was mixed up, but I was like, oh, that's where that idea came from. And I didn't realize it. And I know that happens a lot. So it's definitely a little bit of both. I'm clearly I didn't study design and game design in school. So pretty much everything that I've done and everything that I know is comes, it all comes from what games I've played. And so it's hard not to, reference that stuff. So
well, I asked that simply because we have a lot of devs, and sometimes they'll be like, no, everything I do is totally original. It's not inspired by anything.
It's really rare to see a game that's completely original. So.
Well, not even that, but I really do think that the main reason why a lot of people develop games, and correct me if I'm wrong, as someone that's not really a developer, they develop games that they really want to play in situations like this. They're not developing for... And there's no way I can say this without it being taken in a different context, but, it is what it is. This is purely a letter of love to the games that you probably grew up with. This is not a super, super shiny game specific for marketing purposes. This is a pure platformer. This is a game that was from humble beginnings, pixel art and all that, because you didn't know any better, you couldn't do any better. And now you've got the right team, the right people from the looks of it. The music is phenomenal. Tell me a little bit. We've talked about some of the art style. Tell me a little bit about the music. How'd you stumble across the folks that you worked with on that?
Yeah, I really wish I could have gotten Robbie. I just talked to him earlier today, but he's got a kid now, so he's super busy with that. But so I almost got him on here, but. So I can't speak too much of his process, but I can tell you what how I approached it and with him. So him and I met at a Christmas party one year. We just struck up a conversation about video games, and he's a musician. It was it was right when I was in the middle of Treasure Adventure game, and I was like, I was using music that wasn't mine. It was just kind of filler of pick stuff I liked, and I was like, this is what I would like it to be, but someday I'll have to replace this. So after talking with him, he wanted to get into games, and I needed a musician, and it just worked out pretty well. And so I remember going to his studio one day and bringing over the game and bringing over, again, music from games that I had inspired me, just music that I absolutely loved. And it was a lot of stuff from like games like Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
I think it was I brought some stuff from Yoshi's Island, the first Yoshi's Island game. Trying to think, Kirby, the Kirby series. Like I remember, of course, all Nintendo stuff basically. So I brought over.
I'm not a fanboy, I promise.
So yeah, I brought over a bunch of music like that, and I was like, this is what I like. You know, here's the game. And I really was like, and here's another thing I approach with my artists is that I want them to bring themselves into it too. Like I don't want to just tell them this is what 100% what I want. So I kind of give them a general vibe and say this is what I'm thinking, but I want you to go for it. You're the expert in this. I'm not. So he actually did the first thing he did come back with. I wasn't super happy. It was in the right direction, but I was like, this is not the right feel. Second time, nailed it. So it was only like after that, I don't think there was a single track he sent me where I was like, that's wrong. You know, there was like tweaks, but it wasn't a big deal. So again, kind of like the artist, Christine, quickly just was realized, okay, I can just let him do his thing, and he's going to come back with magic. And so that was really how I approached it. That was when we did the original game, Treasure Adventure game. And then when I came on board, or when we were doing Treasure Adventure World, originally I was thinking, well, because he was also working another job. It was before he had the kid, but he was working at another studio, a startup company that was doing mobile games. And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to be able to get his time now. So maybe I'll just reuse the music. I mean, it's all really good. I don't have a problem with that. And I'll just, we'll revamp the graphics and we'll keep the same music. No problem. But at one point, that job, kind of like when I was working on my MBA, he's like, this is not doing it for me, man. Like this is paraphrasing, but he's like, I need another creative outlet. I need something. So I want to remix all the music and make a new soundtrack for your new game. And he's like, do it without me having to pay him up front. He's going to be taking a cut on the back. And it's like, well, I can't say no to that, man. Like, and ultimately what we decided to do is actually make it so you can select the soundtrack. You can choose original or you can choose the new one, but I wanted him, I like the new one personally. I think it's just like me. I think he learned a lot in his experience through the first game and took everything he learned and all the tools that he now had under his belt and just made like the ultimate version of the soundtrack. Plus new music, I think there's at least 3 or 4 new tracks probably that weren't in the original game. So yeah, that's how that worked.
So the game's grown with you and with the other people who are part of making it then. As over the years you've gotten better at the coding and the programming side of it, your musicians got better at and picked up new skills and new technologies come out in the last couple of years as well.
Right.
And the game's now evolved with that, would you say?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we're not like using the latest greatest technology. It's still, I'm still using an engine that's, I don't know I'm using Construct for this version, and that thing came out, I don't know, probably 8 years ago now. So it's outdated tech, but like it doesn't matter because for a game like ours, you don't need the top of the line stuff.
So it's meta retro, is what you're telling me. It's retro and retro.
Yeah, for sure. It's got layers of retro that you're not even going to see when you play it. So yeah, yeah. Did I answer the question? I think.
Yeah. Where did the idea for redoing it as World come from? Like, was this something you were thinking about when you made the original game, thinking, I wish I could do this, but I don't have stuff around me at the time to do it? And now that you do, you've gone, now I'm putting it in. This should have been there. Now it is there. Or was it more a couple of years later, you've come back to it and gone, actually, I think we can improve this and add more to it?
So it's a good question. And I have thought about this before. So when I released Treasure Adventure game, I really just dropped it out in the world. Like I said, it was freeware. I put it out. You guys were mentioned before we started. I forgot File Hippo or something. I did not upload that, by the way. I checked. That is not mine. That's somebody else uploaded there. But I uploaded it to whatever sites were available for hosting games. And I think I had a small Twitter following at the time. I think I posted on TigSource, which is a developers forum. I actually remember the first day that Notch posted his concept for Minecraft on the same forum. So it was a place where developers were just pitching ideas and stuff. And so I put it out there, and I mean, it's never been updated. The version that's out, actually, I think there was one update. I had to fix one thing. So after that, I was like, I'm done with this game. I was sick of it. And I had worked on it for, I think at that point, 3 years or so, 2.5, 3 years. I was like, I'm ready to move on. Like, I want to do something totally different. And I want to try using different tools and something different. But at the same time, because I didn't sell it, I didn't have any money coming in. It wasn't like I could now pick up a team of people and do something. So I thought, well, I should probably make my next title a commercial game. Like, let's figure out a way to do that. And so I started actually experimenting with doing a top-down space shooter game, and was working on that for about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months. And somewhere in between there, GOG.com, Good Old Games, or GOG, or whatever you want to call it, they approached me. They found my game and said, we want to start selling indie games. And in order to do that, we kind of want to have a promotion where we have like a free game. And your game's free already, but we want to host it on our site. And I was like, that sounds great. I didn't even know, I've never heard of them before at the time. I was like, whatever, this will be good. So let's do it. They sent me this like huge contract, like ridiculous contract. I was like, in all the places where they normally would have put like how much the game cost, it was like, $0. And I was like, oh. I was almost like, I have to be a lawyer, look at this. I'm like, yeah, screw it. Like, I'm not even going to bother with this. and I did it for a little while. I was like, I put it off. But then one day I was like, all right, let me do it. Let me go through this and have my dad's lawyer look at it. And I was like, okay. All right, signed it, sent it out. And it blew up. Like, that was the best thing I ever did, because they actually did have a big audience there, and they were looking for new stuff, but they wanted stuff that was reminiscent of games that they liked, and that were the kind of games that they had on there. People don't know, GOG started with just like making, getting old games that were no longer playable on PCs and revamp them so that you could play them. And they've got like the original Fallout on there, and I mean, tons of stuff. And now they do indie games too and everything. But at the time, they didn't. So what happened was they basically made my game automatically automatically entered everybody's library. And anybody who signed up for GOG after that gets my game in their library. So like suddenly, this was years ago, they told me 500,000 people had my game in their library, which like blew my mind. And that's how that's how our publisher found us. Chucklefish, they found us on GOG.com. And they approached me and said, we would love to do something with this and make this commercial. And they were starting to bring other developers on, like the people, Stardew Valley was one of those games, Risk of Rain was one of those games. And they said, let's do something commercial with this. Let's make like an HD version. And I was like, and again, my first thought was, that sounds awful. I don't want to make this game again. I just finished it. I don't want to do it again.
I don't want to look at it anymore.
So it took me a little while to even feel like I was on board with it. And like I said, the first few artists didn't work out, and I was actually a little frustrated. I was like, maybe this is the wrong move. But kind of like in the original game, a certain amount of time had gone by, and we were in the middle of it, and I was loving it again. And I was thinking about all the things I can do to make this better. And it's like, this is also, when I was playing before, I thought about the cave story model, right? It was actually working. It's like one day I was like, holy crap, my idea to like put out the free game, get interest, maybe make it a commercially viable, that actually was like happening. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is probably the right thing, because it was kind of what I was actually going for. Working with Chucklefish has been awesome. All the people on the board have been great. It's been nothing but like positive, other than the fact that it's just taken a lot longer than I thought it would. In my head I was thinking, well, this first game took me 2.5, 3 years. This is just a remake, so clearly I'm thinking like it'll be half the time, right? Because the game's already designed, right? It's not going to be a problem. No, it's going to be ultimately it'll probably almost take twice as long as the first game did, because we're upscaling it. The graphics are being upscaled, not just like double or quadruple. I mean, it's a totally different style. When you do that, when you take low-res pixel art and you blow it up to HD cartoon graphics, there's more than just replacing every tile with another tile. You've got to add way more layers to it, and add a lot of effects, and things have to be where you can get away with fudging animations, really jerky animations in pixel art. You can't get away with that, and this kind of style. So it was more than just like upscaling it, and I didn't realize that at first. Again, just being naive, I guess. So so yeah, I think that's, again, I don't always know where to stop my point, but that's where I'm going to stop here.
It's a huge story. I mean, the truth of the matter is, for an older game to get a new coat of paint, as much as some people presume that it is simple, and you pretty much told the point right there, is sometimes it's a longer development cycle to go back, and the code might need to be optimized for new. The code might need to be optimized for new platforms. It might need to be optimized for new operating systems. But beyond that, it has to look good. Pixel art back then is not necessarily going to translate well when we've got 4K screens at this point. So it has to look good on every view, right? And it's funny that you mentioned your original experience with GOG or GOG, because look what they went on to do. I mean, they started first. They went on with the Witcher series, and now look where they are. I mean, my goodness. And for them to not only have one of the most, you can't even call them AAA anymore, right? You can't really call CD Projekt Red AAA. They're just an indie that did really, really well. Just like Notch is technically still indie, right? Well, was. But now we've got a major resurgence of indie games all over the place, or a resurgence of retro specifically. And that seems to be like this year's World War II, or like this year's Zombie, which happens to be retro zombies now. Is retro losing luster? Is retro just being used as a marketing tool at this point, as opposed to actual good gameplay?
I wouldn't say it's a marketing tool. I think that a lot of people just had similar thoughts that I had, which is like, I want to get into games, and I think when you see retro games, it's easy to like look at it and say, I could do that. Like, that's something that my skills would lend well to that. You know, you don't need to know how to do, you know, crazy 3D special effects to make a retro looking game. So I think that's why a lot of people are getting on board with it. And I've given this a lot of thought, because it, like I said, or I didn't say this to you guys, but something I've been reiterating a lot in when I've done interviews and talks and stuff, is that like, when I started, you know, in 2000, when I started with this game and released in 2011, it was like, you know, Super Meat Boy was about to come out, and Braid, like, that was like, those were the only two indie games that I really, you know, remember from that time. But there were probably thousands, or maybe at least hundreds of other indie games that you know, that didn't get picked up. And I think it's similar now. There's just more of that. I don't know. It's hard to say like whether there's definitely a huge glut now, but I just don't know. I don't think it's people wanting to market or using it as a marketing tool. I think I'll say in some cases it definitely is, but I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask that question. I get your point, is though, and it's that like, this is the year where, these few years we've seen this huge this like glut of games, and a lot of games that are good are not necessarily getting the sales numbers that they deserve. And maybe games that, and maybe it's because there's a lot of like really bad games coming out, and it's getting people sort of frustrated with the whole thing. And but I still think, like, I think Stardew Valley is a perfect example of that. Like, a good game, even though it looks completely retro and is doing things that other games had done, you know, a decade or 20 years earlier, can still be a huge success, because if it's a good game, it's a good game. But you also have to you can't just make a game now and drop it out there like I did with Treasure Venture Game and expect it to get anywhere, because GOG is not going to come looking for you now. Maybe some other site will, but you know, they moved on. And so I got a little bit lucky by being kind of early with that game, but now with the second game, I no longer have that to fall back on. So I am worried about, will we fall through the cracks? Will people care? Are we just going to be seen as another retro game that is quite trying to make a quick buck? I mean, I hope not. I hope all the things we've done to build up to this point, including having our publisher and having another game out that's got a lot of attention and stuff. I hope that'll all build up to people caring when it's ultimately launched. But it does worry me. I see a lot of good games come and go, you know. Now that I live in New York City now, and so I get to, I've met a lot of other indie developers who are working here and trying hard. And I've seen some people work on games for years and launch it, and then next time I talk to them, I think, how'd that go? And they're like, I'm moving on. I'm doing something else now. And it's really scary. And I don't want that to happen to me, but you know, if that does happen, then we'll figure something else out. But I don't know. I think having Chucklefish on our side and having the goodwill that we've gathered from our previous game, I think that's going to be super helpful. There's a lot of people trying to make indie games right now. There's not a lot of people who have already released a game. You know, there's not as many. We're in a kind of a slightly more exclusive club by already having released a game, you know, and having it been proven that we can, and that at least some people thought it was great. So,
well, now at this point, sorry, someone's dying outside. So at this point, come on, at this point, my best question is, we have. Thank you. We have, it happens. Big city. You live in New York. You know how it is. You get trains and shootings and all that fun stuff.
Yep, I had to close all the windows before this interview.
Well, sometimes I like to have them just drive through the living room. That way they can get to them faster.
Sure.
But what I was going to say, yeah, you mentioned about how now GOG's not going to find you. How do you feel about the online reviewers, the YouTubers, the Twitch streamers being on Twitch right now? Is it just a matter of, since the medium is changing, since we're kind of getting further and further away for entertainment purposes, we're getting away from TV, and broadcast stations and whatnot, and now everything's kind of moving online. The revolution will not be televised; it will be live streamed on Twitch or YouTube Red. So, do you feel like this is a game that would benefit from that kind of exposure? Do you feel like if you got this in the hands of a bunch of Let's Players, for example, or even not to plug them because they aren't paying us, but like the Indie Box, we've done a number of interviews with games that have either gone on or have just gotten released through that. Assault Android Cactus, Galaxy are two of the big ones that pop out. Axiom Verge is another one if you want to talk about Metroid-style games. Like 300 titles in my Steam library and my GOG library are practically games you would see on the old style NES or the SNES even. Do you feel like that might be a way? Would we see Treasure Adventure World someday in one of those outlets?
Well, it's kind of a two-part question. I'll start with the part about YouTube as a streamer. So I do think I think that like YouTubing and streaming is better than having an interview. Well, not like having like a written article written about you or having a review on a website like IGN or something. I think that's sort of old news, and like, I mean, I still go and read those things, but I mean, I get most of my gaming knowledge now from YouTube videos myself. So, and I think a lot of other people do as well. But I also know for a fact from people who have gotten their games played by prominent YouTubers and Twitch streamers that that's not 100% guarantee of success either. So I don't know what the magic solution is, but something between getting a lot of prominent media people to play it and also having a good game and also marketing it properly. It's all important. But I definitely want to make my game as stream friendly as possible, as YouTube friendly as possible. What I'm going to do is, our game is available for pre-order. So if you want to pre-order, do that on my website.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was about to plug it, but please go right ahead.
Yeah, well, our website's treasureadventureworld.com. If you go there, there's a Humble Bundle widget that allows you to pre-order. You'll get a Steam code on release and a DRM free copy through Humble Bundle. So it's $10 to pre-order. It might be higher than that when we launch. I don't know for sure, but we'll probably go a few dollars higher. So now's the time to get in. But what I was going to say is that for our pre-order, a lot of our pre-order people are YouTubers, whether they're big or small, or they're Twitch streamers. And so we definitely plan on, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. So all the people who pre-ordered, they're going to get the game a little early, and that's kind of like their sort of like what they get for, supporting us early on. And I'm going to let them go ahead and stream it and do whatever they want with it. And then at the same time, I'm going to try to reach as many streamers and YouTubers as I can. I think it's super important. I don't believe that hurts sales for a game like ours. I think some games it probably does hurt sales, but I think that people are going to ultimately want to jump into this game themselves when they see it, especially since it's, kind of like non-linear and everyone's experience will be different. So that's that part of the question. I truly believe that's a super important part of the equation. Things like Indie Box and things like that, I'm also for. I actually have talked to the people from Indie Box. I don't know for sure if we're going to do it. I think they have rules where every game has to be available for Linux, Mac, and Windows.
Yes.
And that might take us a little bit longer to get those other versions out. Our initial launch will be a Windows and Mac. And then Linux hopefully will come shortly after. I haven't even attempted a Linux build. So we'll try.
A lot of people that run Linux also have not attempted a Linux build. So there's that too.
So if I can get it working on all three systems, yes, we will definitely do an Indie Box if they will let us. But we have talked to them, so at least we're in discussions. And anything like that, I think those things are all great. I think anytime, any way you can, get the game out there to other people's hands is great. Plus, I mean, who doesn't want a physical copy? I think that's awesome. I mean, I've considered printing the soundtrack on vinyl someday. You know, like I love having stuff like that. You know,
I was about to ask, because I have no shame in admitting that there is at least 300 or 350 vinyls right across the way from where I'm sitting. And I saw the icon on there, which I love the fact that you guys not only offer the original soundtrack, but also essentially the remastered or the new one as well, for the $15 tier, which is a ridiculous bargain, honestly, just to sound salesy for a second.
Thank you.
Because not only the music is absolutely phenomenal. I've already linked down the chat the Bandcamp page for it, and it's just great. I have no problem with saying that chip tunes are a constant rotation on my music library. But I also do like the fact that you're doing almost like a Kickstarter-y type of tier support system without having to go through Kickstarter. We deal with a lot of people that do go through Kickstarter. Is that something that you've ever considered, or is there just too much hassle behind it?
Yeah, so when we did this the pre-order campaign, Kickstarter was still it had a few successes, but it was still pretty new. And the idea of having to like spend an entire month to crunch and push, like I'm really not good at like pushing or marketing myself and selling myself in my game. I've gotten better since then, actually, I think, but at the time I was really not confident that I would be able to pull it off. And I was, you know, because my publisher with Chucklefish, they weren't using Kickstarter. They were doing a Humble Bundle pre-order tier kind of system. And I thought, you know, it worked really well for them. I was like, you know, why don't I just like glom off of that idea and try it ourselves? And I would say it wasn't as successful as I hoped it would be, but it was enough to get us off the ground. And I don't know, maybe a Kickstarter would have been better. I don't know. But we made that choice and we lived with it. And at that point, you know, I felt like it was too late to then do a Kickstarter after we already had this. So instead, what we ultimately ended up doing was getting a private investor on board. And that's pretty much been enough for us to be able to finish the game. So between the combination of having the pre-orders and having an investor come in, we've been okay financially. In the future, depending on how things go, if the game sells really well, I'll hopefully just invest that into the next project. If not, then we'll use all of our goodwill from the fans to hopefully do a Kickstarter or something like that. You know, I mean, I don't have anything against it, and I think that I'm in a much better position now to be able to utilize Kickstarter more effectively than I was when I started the game. But yeah, that was why we made that decision to do it that way. And ultimately, I think it was pretty good. I mean, we've been really lucky in that no one who's pre-ordered has been complained that the game didn't come out when we said it would originally. I think our original launch date was in 2014 when we first started the campaign.
Yeah,
it is long since passed, and everybody's been very understanding. And
well, it's a three-person team.
Yeah,
you know, it's a three-person team. It's almost impossible to hold to deadlines, especially with a remaster, for all the reasons we talked about.
Sure. But I mean, people hold up, you know, indie devs to those kind of standards. I've seen plenty of cases of that where people get upset. We're just lucky. Maybe it's because we haven't quite reached like that certain threshold you get to where a lot of the assholes come in too. Like right now, we just have people who are truly dedicated and understand indie games, and like, you know, I feel like there's that point where when you get to a certain level of success, then you get the bad that comes with the good, right? Like. I think like, you know, anyone who's reached a certain point will see that, but that's just the nature of the internet, I guess. Right.
Well, if it's any consolation, I am an accredited asshole, and I just threw you $15 because that's the joy of live streaming is I can just be right here buying a whole bunch of stuff while people are talking. But no, it is totally worth it. You're a three-person team. You're doing all of this basically from scratch in many cases, right? So why not? I mean, not everybody can be, you know, you're not EA. You don't have teams of people working on this, and you're not doing this full time, right?
So no. I mean, I work another job some of the year. So some of the year I'm doing it full time, and then some of the year I'm not. I have a job that's seasonal.
Yeah.
So it's right now it's not. In a few months, it'll be full time for like, you know, 3 or 4 months, and then I'll kind of go back. So it's like a little bit of both. Yeah, and our artist, she does a lot of contract work, and our musician also has had other jobs. So yeah, we all pretty much do that. So yeah, and it's really hard to predict development time. I mean, even if you are working full time, it's hard to predict development time. But when you also have to work other jobs, it's even harder. So I tell people this all the time. Like there's days when I'm like, I've got one little piece of code I want to change today. It should only take me 10 minutes. And then 6 hours later, okay, now I've got it working. And then there's other, and then but it happens the other way too. There's days when I'm like, oh, I gotta do this thing and it's gonna be a nightmare. How am I gonna fix it? And then 10 minutes later, I was like, wait, it's just that one line of code fixed that? Oh, okay. Well, boom, there you go. I just saved myself hours of work. So it goes both ways. It's completely unpredictable for me. I'm self-taught, coder and designer and everything. So I don't have like best practices or anything. All the best practices I've either just stuff I've read or taught myself. So it's, I know we're not doing things always the right way, but ultimately, I'm trying to make sure that it becomes what, I do it the right way eventually. It's that way, hopefully.
Well, there are plenty of self-taught people that we deal with, especially when it comes to coding or art design. Maybe this is just my opinion as somebody that's done the freelance thing for a very, 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 very long time. It's just one of those things where with the code, my code works. I don't know why. My code doesn't work. I don't know why. Either way, it's just the thing that happens. Do you think that the freelance mentality is something that lends itself better to game development, or does structure actually make a difference in the development scene? Because you just got done with Indiecade recently, and I would imagine that it was an entire room full of people with the exact same setup, where not everybody was a coder by trade. Some of them, we talked to a fellow that started off doing door-to-door sales for a company, and he was doing coding on the side. Is that something that kind of lends credence to the idea that the more artistic you are, the less you care about structure?
That's a tough question. I don't even know where to start with that. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that I don't know the other side of it, you know, so I can only speak it from the side of just kind of doing everything from the seat of your pants. I think it's a great way to do it. I was thinking about like, what would happen if the game was a success? Will I start a studio? Will I want to hire people? Will I want to open up, actually rent some office space? I'm not sure. Maybe even if it was a big game, maybe my next game would be done in a very similar way. I mean, all our artists and musicians, they all work other side of the country, we don't ever interact physically hardly ever. We are on Skype and stuff, and it's worked out pretty good. There are days when I feel like I wish I could just reach over across the desk and be like, look at this is what I want, or let's collaborate, come in here and let's write on the board and do some collaboration. It's I think stuff like that could be super useful. So maybe there's something in between the two where we could, we could get together every few months and actually hash out ideas, and then I'll go do our own thing. I don't really know what the best solution will be. I do worry that if I suddenly had the money to open a studio and I did that we would probably end up well, first of all, it'd be a whole new set of challenges we'd have to overcome. And whereas now we've sort of worked out how everything worked for us now. So I don't really know what would be best. Maybe we'll try that, and I'll let you know next time. Next game we do, if we do that, I'll let you know. But I don't know. I see the benefits to both. I just don't know how I would be able to manage that. I don't know. Basically, I am the team lead. I wear a lot of hats right now. I would like to pass some of those hats off to other people in the future. I don't like being a coder. It's not what I want to do. I do it because I have to. I can't afford to hire somebody to do this for me. Maybe in the future I can. And that's something I would be willing to hand off. I would kind of like to maybe even hand off a project manager type situation. I just really want to be a designer. I want to design ideas for games. I want to design levels. I want to design puzzles. I want to design stories. So if we could do things, the way depending on how it works financially, that's how I would probably approach things.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because Raylak is our project manager. Huh? Fancy that.
Yeah, Raylak, it's helpful, right?
Raylak, do you want to be headhunted currently?
The current structure at OPN, our structure is a tent which I have to chase Stephen around with and just keep putting the structure up wherever they are.
Which is funny because that's
as soon as I finish setting it up, he runs off again. I have to carry it off.
Well, it's funny you mention that because that's what we do. It's actually good that your people are scattered all over the place because I feel like in many cases, if a team works together all the time, they then want to kill each other all the time.
Sure.
So the fact that they are separated by Skype, like for example, if you couldn't tell by Rylak's wonderful dulcet tones, he's not necessarily in the States. So there is that. But in regards to structure, Rylak, where do I even begin? Because this is kind of your bread and butter. So what exactly is it that you feel that the structure could bring to your project? As somebody that is more focused on the actual development side, here are the boring questions, folks, for you business folks that are watching. Where exactly do you think the structure would actually benefit? Just the project as a whole or anything specific?
It's for me, yeah.
I know Rylak will say everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would just give like it would. I mean, I think first of all, it would just speed up development in general because I have to wear a lot of hats. There's some days like yesterday I decided I should really update my blog. It's been a while. That takes me half a day. I actually didn't even finish it. I did work out half a day and said that's enough of that. I gotta work on the game now. So it's like stuff like that to be able to delegate tasks like community management and PR and dealing with legal stuff that takes away from me developing, So I think that ultimately, if you delegate things properly to the right people and and you have the right kind of communications and you're organized and you stay relatively organized, it's just going to make everything smoother and happen faster. And whether you'll end up with a better product at the end, I don't know. Hopefully, probably, but ultimately you're going to be more efficient, and that saves you money. And money, that's how the world goes around. I mean, if money didn't matter, then I would probably make, I'd probably never stop making this game. I would just keep refining. But I have to realize at some point it's got to be cut off. It has to be released. I have to be able to
don't be Lucas. So. Don't do that.
Exactly. So I don't know. So I guess I hope that answers your question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but
that's fine. Maybe project management will help with the answers too. So that being said, I think we are going to end up wrapping it up. I do have two more real quick questions for you. But Rylak, do you have any final thoughts from what you've seen?
I do. A question on when GOG released this and basically ninjaed it into everyone's libraries. People just suddenly went, hey, you know what? I'll just play that. It's just shown up today. I don't know where it came from. What sort of reaction did you get from that? I mean, did people just suddenly start looking up the game, wondering where it came from, and start giving you feedback on it? How did that feedback go?
So at the point that happened, like I said, I hadn't updated the game in a while because in my eyes, I was done with it. So I had really gotten all the feedback as far as that kind of stuff had gone. But what I saw was just a huge uptick in all my social media. I saw, people following me, people emailing me. I got tons of emails, and I got a lot of really nice emails. Like that was mostly what motivated me to do the remake, was how many people emailed me saying this game meant so much to me, and I was, by the time I was crying when it was over, I was like, I want more. Like I got just beautiful, and I saved those because it's nice to look at those sometimes. And if you go to GOG's website and you look at the reviews, they're all glowing. And it started to get attention from it won some awards on some small websites and stuff, and that's all stuff that just came from that. And it definitely was the thing that made me think, okay, I did something right here. I didn't know if I did something right. I didn't know what I did, because in my eyes I thought it was good, but I'm biased, so that was justification that yes, this is something that maybe I am good at this. Maybe this is something I can do, make a living with. If it wasn't for GOG, I don't think I would be here doing this anymore. I probably would have given up, because maybe not. Who knows what would have happened? But I think the game I was doing, this over 2D space shooter game, it probably was never going to go anywhere. I would have done something else. I don't know, but
we don't have enough space shooters in the world, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Yeah, it was the best thing that's happened to us for sure. That started everything as far as I'm concerned. Is that good?
No.
One more thing leading from that. You say so far that you haven't really hit the asshole barrier yet. So you haven't started to get the troll Steam reviews, which I know Stephen loves.
I do.
Did you get any sort of negative feedback on the game, of just general asshole feedback? Or did people try and give you constructive feedback of, hey, I love this game, but this little part here was really irritating? Or
Yeah. So the only really negative feedback I got was that I remember was actually when we first announced the new game and we showed the new art style, and it turned a lot of people off. It made me question whether we were making the right call there, because we were getting some people just kind of like just writing it off, like, oh, this looks like crap. And I actually got people saying it looks like a Flash game. I remember people saying this looks like a Flash game now, and I was like, what are you talking about? So, I mean, but maybe some of that was good, because it actually did force me to like relook at things, saying, I guess I can see what they're saying. Some of these animations are rough. I mean, nothing was really too brutal. There were some things I thought were a little unfair, but for the most part, everything was constructive, especially everything from the first game. YouTube comments are always like, you're always going to get a handful of those. So I think the only bad comments I've ever gotten were things maybe from trailers and stuff. You see a few people being like, "What is this crap?" But nothing that like I can't handle. Nothing that bothers me more than a few seconds. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And because we haven't, here's the thing. Whether this is right or wrong, I always think to myself, if I read like a really ignorant comment, I just imagine them as like a little 10-year-old kid like typing that out, because we don't know, right? It could be. And as long as I could think of it like that, it doesn't bother me. I don't take that stuff too seriously. Ultimately, though, if we ever reach that pinnacle where there's a lot more of that coming at me, maybe I'll change my tune on that. But I think I can handle it. So yeah.
I've always been of the opinion that if you're getting a lot of negative feedback, that's not necessarily bad. It means people are paying attention.
Right. Yeah, I thought that too. Yeah.
And speaking of terrible comments and comments that have nothing to do with anything, is there any possibility of seeing this on Steam in a future release, or maybe going through Steam Greenlight, or is it going to stick
the original game or the new one?
Either. I know right now it's on GOG.
The new one's been greenlit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that will be on Steam.
But the original, because
so yeah,
it would be nice.
I've been thinking about that, and I don't know the best way to handle it, because the thing is, I thought, do I release it? Should I try to get that through greenlight like before the new game, or maybe I should do that like later when the new game is the sales have dropped. Maybe it's like, hey, push out Treasure Adventure game with like a slight, like maybe like a little DLC pack attached to it, and put it out there for like a few bucks, or even maybe free again. I don't know. Maybe just put it out for free as like, again, like, hey, and then maybe that will get more people to come. But I think that's probably what I'll do, is probably wait till the sales dip on Treasure Adventure World, and then put out Treasure Adventure game on Steam if I can get it through greenlight, which I'm sure I probably could.
Yeah.
Get it through greenlight and put that up as like a thank you, kind of thing, and maybe also brought in more people. I've considered it. It's just that I feel like doing it beforehand might just cause confusion. People download it and play it who don't already know what the deal is, and then they play that and then see the next one. I don't know. I just don't want to confuse people. I think I want Treasure Adventure to stand on its own for the people who don't already know what we've done. I want the fans to, obviously, hopefully, my thinking is that the fans will buy it, the ones who have already pre-ordered, and then other people will start to see it pop up hopefully on the bestsellers list, or at least, somewhere on there, and then get people who don't have any idea what it is. And if you put the two games out, it might just confuse the people who aren't in the know. I'm not sure. I'm trying to reach a more mainstream audience than I have before, so I'm trying to be considerate of that. It's probably something I should discuss with my publisher. So see what they think and get their opinion. That's usually what I do when I don't know what the right solution is. They've had a lot of successes at Chucklefish, so they have a lot of talented people on board. So I'll probably ultimately leave that up to them. But I'm thinking post launch, maybe 6 months or a year after the launch, maybe we'll do something like that. So especially if it's super successful, then I'll definitely do it, because why not? So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I for one would love to see this maybe bundled in, not to tell you how to do the thing, but I would love to see this version of the game with a special download code, or just the DLC package, like you said. The soundtrack is definitely phenomenal. It will get heavy rotation for sure. So I'm just going to do a real quick plug for us, and then I'm going to do a real quick plug for you, and then I just want to thank you ahead of time for joining us today. And we obviously went maybe a tiny bit over time, but it was just a wonderful story. Either way, so the big old plug for those guys first. It's Treasure Adventure World. It is the remastered edition, essentially, of the original Treasure Adventure game, which is available online for free So if you want to get a kind of little taste of the game, you should go do that. You can find it on some of the oldest sites ever in existence online.
I'll tell you where it is. It's on GOG.com. It's on Gamefront.com. It's on AtomicGamer.com. It's on FilePlanet.com and FileHippo, apparently.
So really, the safest place, and FileHippo, yeah, I know. Yeah, I was surprised to see that.
Go to GOG. If you don't already have an account, sign up for an account. You're going to get, I think you get a couple free games now. Mine will be on there.
You get like 6 or something.
Yeah,
they give you
service. And they've got a client now. It's fantastic. So.
It is a wonderful client. I actually use that for pretty much all the games that I have because it's just much more streamlined. I hope someday they bring out cloud saves is the only thing that they're missing, and then I'll be happy. But anyway, Treasure Adventure World. Find it at treasureadventureworld.com/pre-order. I'm going to put that in the chat. You should really throw them some money because they deserve it. It's an awesome game. That being said, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to find out more about us, go to OPNoobs.com. If you think we suck, go to OPNoobs.com and prove to us that we suck by joining the team and improving the team, because that's how this stuff works. We are for gamers, by gamers. Everything you see on the site is totally community built. None of it comes from developers. None of it comes from publishers. We do it for the love of gaming. And because we do it for the love of gaming, we need money. We're broke. We do giveaways every single Tuesday on our Tuesday night shows at 9:30 on these shows as well. We occasionally do giveaways of keys for games. So all you got to do, or what we would like you to do, is to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, which is also OPNoobs. Down there in the thingy, there's a Patreon. We need to start paying. We need to start feeding our writers. Like literally feeding them. Right now, they're just eating mayonnaise and cans of tuna. They need some actual food. Look, he's eating Tootsie Rolls. Do you want him to eat Tootsie Rolls? We can't have a business running on Tootsie Rolls. But that being said, again, from all of us at OPNoobs to all of you at Robit Studios, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Totally looking forward to the game when it fully releases.
This was a great interview, guys. It really was. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to disappear for a bit. You guys, we have more interviews coming tomorrow, starting at, I think, like 1 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. So check us out there as well. But again, we're going to go away so he can go off and do more stuff, and so that we can go off and do more stuff. And then we'll just come back together when we have more stuff. So good night, everybody, or good day, everybody. We're going to just stare blankly like an 80s or 90s sitcom, and we're just going to wave like this while Stylo gets rid of us.